Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's fact. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best. I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
Welcome back to this week's episode of the Last Round Podcast. Thank you again for joining us. We were off last week for the holiday breaks. We apologize. So we're giving you a little bit of a catch-up episode here in the new year of 2024. But we're obviously going to talk about some events, particularly the Day of Reckoning in Saudi Arabia in December, one of the last events of 2023 in boxing. And our guest this week, he's with Pro Box TV. I think he's with like 1,000 different spots right now, but his main spot is Pro Box TV. He was with The Insider previously out of Las Vegas, Nevada, a new resident in the United States. I think we could still call him a new resident in the United States, especially here in on the West Coast. Al Dawson returns to the Last Round. Thank you again for joining us, Al.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year. So let's jump straight into it. Like we mentioned, it was the 23rd of December in 2023 from the Kingdom Arena in Saudi Arabia, a DAZN pay-per-view. Anthony Joshua gets the victory over Otto Wallin. And then also Joseph Parker. I don't know. Obviously, we're going to get your take on this, Al, but some people call it an upset. Some people didn't. Joseph Parker gets the unanimous decision win over 12 rounds against Deontay Wilder. And obviously the big news out of this event and the tentative plan was to match AJ and Wilder finally sometime maybe in the first 6 months of the new year of 2024. So pretty much, Al, how does this affect that entire plan that everybody wanted to see between AJ and Wilder? What do you think?
Ever since I started covering fights, I don't really root for one person in particular, but there is something in the back of my head, this little devil on my shoulder that just wants to root for chaos. So what happened on that night was kind of one of the things that I like to see, where these plans are made. And it could have been like Sky Sports, for instance, building up Anthony Joshua. You know, they were telling me ages ago that AJ, they were seeing him as being like a Roger Federer of tennis. That's kind of the corporate plan they had with him. And then he went like a few weeks later, he went and lost to Andy Ruiz in a humiliating loss. But ever since he's come back since then. But yes, the chaos here was, everyone was kind of looking at Otto Wallin as being the banana skin opponent, but it was Deontay Wilder who slipped up, and he didn't just slip up in the way that the fight can still be made. I don't think it can be made now. I don't think it.
So Al, so if everybody listening, they can hear a little whisper in the background. Al's little son, his little boy, is in his room. It looks like Al's the babysitter for tonight. So if you hear some little whispering,
this one's called Rocky. He's living up to his name right now.
So Rocky's actually on the show right now with Dad. So if you hear some whispering, he's right there in the background. Hello. But Mike, Wilder, AJ. Is it still going to happen? What do you think, Mike?
I think it could. I think that at times boxing needs to take more of a look, like Al does. When you look, he covers MMA and boxing. That you still get Dustin Poirier and Gaethje. They've both taken losses. Look at Diaz. Nate Diaz is one of the most popular UFC fighters. He's had a whole host of losses, and I think that at times it's all about matchups. And I still think Wilder AJ would still be a good matchup. The build-up would be good. But just as boxing fans, we've got so used to as soon as someone's losses, that's it, they're done. We don't want to see it anymore. And if you're Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua, that's probably the card that you want to play. Because of the chance that, how easily AJ gets hit, and obviously now Wilder's lost. Hopefully he comes back. and he comes back more aggressive like the Wilder that we saw before. So I'm sure AJ and Eddie Hearn, they don't want any part of that. So I'm sure they're going to play, oh, well, Wilder's done now. We don't want that. We're on to bigger and better things now.
You agree with that, Al? What do you think?
Kind of. I think like if Wilder was younger, I think it would be like a different story potentially, because he's 38 years old. And if his power or his confidence in his power is diminishing at this age, it's like if you're playing FIFA 2024, Wilder's power would be ranked 99 out of 100, and then a lot of his other skills would be quite a lot below that. So if his power is suddenly going down to like 89, his average is, he's no longer an an A tier heavyweight, and it's kind of win and move on for these two. I think Joshua's just got bigger fights now. Like he's put himself right back into the mix. If regardless of what happens with Fury and Usyk in February, if Tyson wins, then the Fury and Joshua fight is far bigger, in my opinion, than Fury and Wilder. Now that Wilder's not only lost, but lost looking, if he'd actually got Parker down or won more rounds, then the story would be different. But the way the fight went, it's maybe he fights Jarrell Miller on like a Saudi Arabia show or something like that, and then if he beats him, and then he can come again, and return to a position he might have been in had he beaten Parker. But yeah, for Joshua, not only is he got the Fury Usyk winner potentially, it might be a little bit different if Usyk wins because Usyk's already beaten Joshua twice, but. If Joshua gets another good win over someone pretty credible, then whoever's got the belts, Joshua should probably be right at the front of the line. And even if he was going to play a waiting game, Joshua and Ngannou, it can probably be made in Saudi Arabia. Joshua Zhang could probably be made, well, it's certainly in Saudi Arabia, but also at the Bird's Nest in Beijing. I think that would be like a huge event in China. But it just depends whether it would make more money at the Bird's Nest or, appealing to a Chinese market where there's like, I don't know how many billion people there are and how big of a star Zhang is. But Wei Li in UFC, when she fights, so many people in China watch, and that's kind of led to a boon in, they've got a peer performance institute in China. They've got like Road to UFC, which features, Asia-based fighters. And, maybe Zhang could help leverage, that interest in combat sports specifically in boxing. I just think those matchups I think are more, maybe not more interesting, but I think in terms of revenue, I think they would bring in more now than what Joshua Wilder is. And it's just, I think it's also, normally I'm a bit of a cheerleader in boxing, but this to me is one of the things where boxing just fails. How many fights could we have seen between Joshua and Wilder already by now, had they made the fight when it was hot? And if you want to blame Matchroom, if you want to blame PBC or blame Joshua or blame Wilder, it's kind of irrelevant. The fight didn't get made, and it could have been made twice already. And we could have had, not only did Wilder participate in one of the greatest heavyweight trilogies of all time with Tyson Fury, he could have probably done one of the best, two-fight rivalries with Joshua had those two fought. Because I don't know if they fought 10 times, I don't know who would have won. Joshua could have tried to box him, and maybe he would have. Managed to survive 12 rounds. But if it was the Joshua between the guy who beat Klitschko and the guy that was losing to Usyk, if Wilder touches him, I think Joshua's dead. Not only would he be completely scrambled, when that period of Joshua's career, when he was hit, he really didn't react very well. Whereas the opposite is true with Wilder. He could get knocked down by a truck and he would still be trying to get up, and he fired one of his coaches because they pulled him out of a fight. This guy would, he's said before that he wants to catch a body in the ring, but really, that body could easily be his own because he just has, for me, doesn't really have any quit in him. But all of that's over now, and there's a lot of people to blame. Don't really know who to blame, but the fan interest was there, and boxing failed us by not making that fight when it was hot. And yeah, it's not really hot anymore. I think Joshua's got just bigger, more financially rewarding fights to have that are outside of Wilder. But I also want to say credit to Joshua because, how many different parts of this guy. There's so many different parts of his career. There was the bruiser, the Olympian and the amateur. He had a silver medal at the World Amateur Championships. And then the next year he got the gold medal at the Olympics. I don't think he really deserved the gold. I think he should have lost to Pavon in the very first round. And I think he got a few kind of, fortuitous decisions going his way that he didn't really deserve. But he did get the gold. And then there was just this springboard where he could have signed with anyone and he would have been a star. He linked up with, I think he took 9 months out to look at all of the options, and he had, quite a few. He signed with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. And really, Joshua is Eddie Hearn's probably his greatest success story. He brought stadium fights back to the UK, brought along a huge interest in the heavyweight division after quote unquote a cold dark winter because of the Klitschko's. I don't think it was that cold. I think it was hot in Germany, but Joshua is really to his credit to really bring around all this interest in the heavyweights, and then he looked kind of super vulnerable after losing to Ruiz. Looked vulnerable against Klitschko. Looked vulnerable for a while and gun shy. Now all of a sudden he's back. I feel like maybe now we could see. The conversation is shifting. Could we see something like Joshua become what Klitschko was like under Emmanuel Stewart? Is he going to have like this, like third chapter of his career where he's suddenly going to fight another 10 times and probably, maybe win one version of the world heavyweight title and be a 3-time heavyweight champion? That would be an incredible legacy. And even though Tyson Fury has got the wins over Klitschko and the rivalry over Wilder, when all is said and done, it really wouldn't surprise me now that Joshua, out of all of the bodies, out of all of the knockouts, after all of the fights, that he's the one with the, with the legacy.
Going off Wilder's performance and then what he said in after the fight, his post about interview, I think a good quote from Mickey from Rocky: "The worst thing that happened to you can happen to any fighter. You got civilized."
Possibly. Yeah, that could work. Al, do you think, going back to when we first touched on this topic, do you think Parker's win over Wilder should be looked at as an upset?
I think so, but I did hear from, there were various people like in the industry I was speaking to in the build up to that, and they were saying don't sleep on Parker, and it was people that were either close to him or knew things about difference in his personal situation and the way he's I guess rededicating himself to the craft. But yeah, I think there are people in the industry who weren't surprised at the result. I wasn't expecting Wilder to I was expecting Wilder to win. I was thinking Joshua out of the two could be the one who was going to, either lose by finish or lose by, or win, but it was a dodgy decision. Certainly an upset in my book.
I mean, I thought Wilder was going to beat him. I don't really rate Parker. And if Wilder had started like he did in the 12th round, because Parker was scared. As soon as he came out, like the old school Wilder, which he did in one round, was the 12th round, Parker was just like covering up, hiding the whole time. But kind of like he said in the post about speech himself, like he's got a family, he kind of comes softened, he doesn't like need it as much. And maybe it was just all that stuff that Malik Scott was telling him to do was just too much. Like just go back to the basics, like pretty much just jab. And everything is about setting up that right hand because it's so fucking good. And he just didn't do that. He just seemed to be like going very slowly, kind of working his way through it and like kind of too confident, thinking to himself, it'll come. And he'd lost nearly every single round. And then just in the 12th was the only round you could see the old school Wilder, and Parker didn't know what to do. He'd kind of like had some of, not obviously full effect, but he'd had like, some taking on the gloves and stuff like that. And he was kind of ducking down, just hiding the whole time. And I think if he'd have started like that in round one, I think he'd have taken him out of there because Parker really, what's he done, as a pro? That's his biggest win by a mile. Absolute mile.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Struggled against Andy Ruiz, probably lost that fight, but got it because it was in New Zealand. Struggled against Chisora, beat against Joshua. Everyone else, Dempsey McKean was a sparring partner. He's got no real notable wins. I can't think of one performance apart from them, maybe that Wilder performance, where I've gone, fucking hell, that was a great performance by Parker. I would love to pay for a ticket to watch him. Never. Absolutely never.
Al, do you think that Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, should have just made AJ Wilder first?
Yeah, I mean, it's all hindsight. It's like, it could have been a great move, to have them both on the same card, but they both win, and then they, meet each other in the ring, at the end of the night. Maybe that was the plan, and it didn't work out. But yeah, I think it just goes back to the same thing. If there's a fight that's hot, why does it need to be sat on for 6 years? And the same thing I think is true for Beterbiev and Bivol. That we need to see that fight. Sooner or later, one of those is going to lose. But like Bivol, Turkey Al-Sheikh was, holding hands with him and Jai Opatay for a photo, and it's like, are you trying to tease us that this is a fight that you want to make, in Saudi Arabia when Bivol should be fighting Beterbiev? There's no excuse that those two guys are the two dons in their division and they're still not fighting. So, wouldn't surprise me to see one of those guys lose this year, and then we're in the same song and dance again. If the fight is hot, make it. I could understand. We've got quite a few guys in the lightweight, super lightweight, those kind of divisions where you just throw 8 names in a hat, pick out 2 of them, and you're going to be, looking at a good fight. I can sort of see why you would want to marinate some things, but look at Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. How long was that fight hot for? Only needed. They could have marinated that fight for a few more years, but they didn't. They booked it, to the credit of probably Ryan Garcia, who was really forcing that fight to happen. It sold to 1.2 million homes in the US. That's a runaway hit in the modern box office pay-per-view market with streaming options, and piracy and all these things. I don't think UFC went over anywhere near 1 million in the whole of 2023 for their pay-per-view game. Boxing had that leader, and it was all because of a fight that didn't need to be made but was made, and it was hot for probably only a year. Make the fight, and I'm sure we're going to get more fights and events that do sell more, over 500,000. All of those numbers would have been a success. But yeah, they should be. They're probably not going to be too mad, because I think with the way Joshua won, it does mean they could revisit, or not revisit. Revisit. I think Joshua was kind of mentioned as a possible opponent for Francis Ngannou. If they want to go kind of the clown show route, that would be one. It did make me think though, like Ngannou. It was kind of a perfect storm when he fought Fury, because Fury kind of probably didn't even train. Grossly ill-prepared for someone who was, could obviously box. And then there was media days here in Vegas. I went to one where Ngannou was throwing punches at like 5% speed. And we were all like saying, this guy's going to get fucked up. What are we even doing here? I was always thinking back to those media days going, he was clowning us the whole time, clowning everyone, trying to make it seem like he was nowhere near as good as he was. I think that Ngannou would have probably done the same thing to Wilder. The only person he might not have done it to would have been Joshua. He still could have probably shocked the world had it been Ngannou against Wilder. That was the fight I always wanted to see, the biggest puncher in MMA against the biggest puncher in boxing. Get those two worlds colliding. Neither guy is known for their technical, acumen, but they can both bang, and they can both bang a lot of people out. Don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, Josh, I feel like Turkey Al-Sheikh, because he's got options. I think in the heavyweight division where it's not going to hurt the brand too much.
Right, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency. That's right.
That's what you have to say, right? That's what everyone keeps saying. One thing I wanted to touch on before we moved on, is I kind of think people are getting a little bit carried away about the performance, because one of the things that's always made him kind of, I don't know, not as good as he maybe was before is he overthinks things, right? And he's always kind of like second guessing himself and running things through his mind and being a huge overthinker. But when he fought Wallin, he'd faced Wallin twice as an amateur. And Wallin was also an ex-sparring partner for when he fought Prince Charles. So when I think you saw AJ walk into the ring and he looked super confident, he knew what was coming. He'd already been in the ring with this guy. So I think everyone's like, oh my God, AJ's back. Ben Davidson's a fucking legend. And I'm like, yeah, but he's already fought this guy. You know, if it was someone brand new, that's where AJ tends to be kind of wary and doesn't know what's coming. So I think he's a very good opponent in terms of like he's faced him twice as an amateur, sparring partner, been in camp with him. He kind of knows what's coming. And I think that's why that we've turned back the clock and we've got such a good AJ performance, but no one really seems to be touching on that.
Right. No, yeah, I could definitely agree with that. And then quickly on Bivol, Al, is Bivol one of those guys, and also to you, Mike, is Bivol one of those guys that, you know, they could be inactive for an extended period amount of time, but then when they come back, they're just one of those fighters that always find their form, and it just looks like, oh, well, they're just a natural fighter. Because I feel like Bivol, even though, you know, there was a couple, I forgot who he fought a couple years back. He didn't look that good. He still won, but Bivol just strikes me as one of those fighters. What do you think, Al?
I think it's kind of a dangerous game to play, though, only because I feel like that's the exception that would prove the rule. Like, but if Bivol's the exception, surely it's eventually going to catch up with him. I was going to mention with Wilder, he'd only fought 2 minutes and 57 seconds in between the third loss to Fury in 2021 and going into the ring with Parker. So in more than 2 years, he'd only round, and that was when he iced Robert Helenius. You know, how important is activity in boxing? You know, how active was Errol Spence going into the Terence Crawford fight? You know, how, you know, even though people, including me, kind of ridiculed Crawford's decision to fight on BLK Prime against, was that Venetian he ended up fighting?
Right. Well, like,
you know, questionable opponent, you know, for someone of Crawford's stature. But, you know, if you're still putting in the rounds and you're still going, you know, you're still doing the training camps and all these things, staying in the gym, staying sharp, you know, living the life, you know, that's still important. You know, and for Errol Spence, inactivity and, you know, whether it was car crashes and various other things that had been going on in his personal life that had caught up with him where he just didn't look himself at all. I don't know. I just feel like there's a theme playing out in like the last 3 years where people who are inactive against people who are active, and it's usually the people who are active who are picking up the wins. So for Bivol, yeah, if he's going to, you know, have these years where he only fights, you know, he fought twice in 2022. I mean, that was his best year. You know, beat Canelo and then he beat Zurdo, but then he's, you know, gone 13 whole months before he's getting in the ring with Lyndon Arthur, who, you know, is that the best prep to get in the ring with Beterbiev?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
that's been his career, though. He's been Mr. Avoided the whole time, and you know, I think it'd be age that would catch up with Bivol more than anything else because he just tends to be like those Eastern Bloc fighters. Maybe apart from Kovalev, you know, they can kind of stay out the ring. They're super dedicated. They're always, you know, sparring. They don't really seem to like drink and party and do the other things that, like, you know, Brits like I'll do, you know. So it's, you know, you say it tends to be good. I mean, fingers crossed, like Al said. I hope, you know, Bivol got his win. Hopefully Beterbiev gets his win in the upcoming fight with Callum Smith, and yeah, we see that, and you know, that'll be undisputed, right, in the light heavyweight.
Yeah. Hopefully that's the plan here. And also the 26th of December in 2023 on ESPN Plus, the monster Naoya Inoue remains undefeated at 26-0 with a 10th round KO over Marlon Tapales, who takes the fourth loss of his career. The monster is now the undisputed super bantamweight champion of the world. Out, you know, does he move up to 126? I mean, that's usually the tentative plan when stuff like this happens, right? Like, oh, okay, well, I guess you got to keep going until you finally meet your match, right?
I mean, he's got. I mean, people are linking him with Gervonta Davis. I think that's too far. Like,
that's too far.
You know, yeah, too far right now. You know, who knows what can happen in, you know, the next 3 or 4 years. But yeah, that seems like it's so far away. And I think even people from Top Rank are just, you know, if Gervonta's having catchweight fights with Ryan Garcia at 140, it's that's just too far. But yeah, that's a phenomenal year from Inoue, beating Stephen Fulton in a fight that I don't think people had that as a 50-50. It might have been like 55-45, but still, that's as close as it sometimes gets in boxing. And he wiped him out, and then he wipes out Tapales as well with two. I think it was 2 knockdowns, wasn't it? One in the 4th, one in the 10th, and cleans out basically an entire division in 2 fights after clearing out bantamweight, last year as well.
Is he pound for pound, or is it Crawford? Because that's a big debate right now.
Yeah, it's so pathetic to say, can we have 1A and 1B? Because whoever's 1B is 2.
Right.
Whoever's 1A is who you're saying is 1. I don't know, because it's like I feel like I'm probably US biased in the sense that I've actually seen Crawford live, so I probably appreciate him more. And I was there for Errol Spence, and I feel like that was one of the best wins of all time at 147 pounds. But in a way, feels like, they're both great to have in this era. I feel like both. Yeah. Like I was just about to say, in a way, feels like a generational talent. Crawford is as well,
right?
But it feels like if Crawford's going to be a master of maybe like. Yeah, I know he's had belts in other weight classes, but maybe he gets his bigger, legacy type of fights like Mayweather did at the higher weights that he's not really more well known for. But Inoue seems to be, the next Pacquiao, in the sense that, how many weight classes are we going to see him go through? And a lot of time fighters knock a lot of opponents out when they're coming up, but then as soon as you're fighting other champions or other contenders, you're still beating them, but the knockouts stop. But the knockouts aren't stopping.
They're not.
And these are matchups that are tough, and he's just manhandling them. I had after David Benavidez beat Demetrius Andrade, we were doing some like post-fight shows in the media room, and I was saying this guy's the baddest motherfucker in the game. He's as close to Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal, these BMF status that you have in MMA. This is our version, but I don't know, in a way is giving Benavidez a run for his money because he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
In all the good ways.
Yeah, no, he's definitely a bad guy. Yeah. And like you said, he's carrying the power just like Pacquiao did from those lower weight classes as he goes up, every time we think, oh, it's a new weight class, it's 4 or 5 pounds above, like, he might win by decision, but who knows if who knows if he's going to knock this guy out? Like, yeah, I think probably his toughest fight, I would say, the last couple of years or so has been probably the Nonito Donaire. I think the first fight, Donaire really gave him a battle. But yeah, in a ways, he's definitely a generational talent. So let's see how many times, and he stays active. We talk about activity. Yeah, he's staying active. He is fighting pretty much as soon as he can, every couple months, every quarter. Which I'm sure doesn't hurt his development, if you want to call it that. Then moving on to fight previews, one of the first prominent events in the United States in the boxing world, this upcoming Saturday, the 6th of January, from the Virgin Hotels in Las Vegas, Nevada, Al's neck of the woods now on DAZN. Virgil Ortiz Jr. returns for the first time in a long time after battling some medical issues as he goes up against Frederick Lawson, 30-3. This is a Golden Boy card on DAZN from Las Vegas. So Al, obviously this seems like just to get Ortiz back in the groove of things, especially after what he's been through medically. So, how do you see this fight playing out? And, we hope, obviously, this is fight week. We're recording this during fight week for this. And the previous 2 fights that he had scheduled in the past, all his stuff, the medical issues that he experienced did happen during fight week, essentially. So here's fingers crossed that nothing happens between now and Saturday or even after. Hopefully he's okay. But have you been hearing anything about, Virgil Ortiz Jr.'s, medical condition, or is he? I mean, obviously, he seems okay if he's going to be scheduled to fight on Saturday. But have you heard anything behind the scenes?
Not behind the scenes to the level that they're still prevalent and might be an issue. It seems like Golden Boy's actually planning a pretty interesting fight week, and I don't think they would if there was any indication that the main event and main attraction, the knockout puncher is going to be possibly removed from the show, particularly when you look at the card. They haven't got the kind of Blair Cobbs, Alexis Rocha to man up and step up and take the main event. That was a pretty I wouldn't say a good replacement, because I was there. That was the first time I'd covered a fight in Southern California, so I was looking forward to seeing Virgil. And I got to LA and then parked, looked at my phone. Oh, main event's dead.
Yeah,
there's that's literally the only time it's ever happened in my career. So it's not too that's not it's going to happen. But this card is it's more like a showcase kind of card. With Virgil against Frederick Lawson. He's lost 3 times and they've all been by knockout. But Virgil, this is his first super. This is him going to be fighting at super welterweight. It seems like other fighters at Golden Boy, whenever I've talked to them, I think I even spoke to Lex about it. Whether because Golden Boy, they must have been if you've got a whiteboard in a war room and you're putting anything can happen in fights, but you're making your little plans. Like we've got 2 guys here. Virgil could go down the WBA route. Alexis could go down the WBO route. They both pick up a version of the welterweight title and then they fight each other for. I think that was going to be the plan. But even Lex was saying Virgil's not going to be fighting at 147 ever again. That was like last year. I'm not sure how long he's going to stay at 154. Because even
he's a big kid.
I think Robert. Yeah, I think even Robert Garcia was saying he'd like to see a fight with Jamal Charlo, and Jamal just fought Jose Benavidez, but that was I think at like 1-6. I want to say like 164. I'm sure that was a catchweight fight that they'd only kind of moved on the week of the event. But yeah, Jamal's a big guy. Like he's at least 6'1". So, if they're lining up kind of opponents like that for Virgil, I'm not sure how long he's going to stay at 154. So the intrigue is whether his power is still there. He's had the health issues and this is a new weight class. But in Frederick Lawson, surely that's an ideal opponent to show that the power remains.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully, as of this recording, everything's okay right now for Virgil Ortiz, and hopefully it stays like that. Yeah, because he's 0 for 2 in the last 2 fights, at least in medically, so the experiences he's been going through. So hopefully he's got a handle on it, and everything's been good to go. Mike, what's your take on the whole Virgil Ortiz matchup here this weekend? And pretty much just give us your take.
I think Virgil wins pretty easy, to be honest with you. I think he'll win by knockout. Frederick, even though they're fighting at 154, Frederick Lawson is a 147 fighter that they're dragging up. And if anything, Virgil Ortiz Jr., pardon me, may be better, because if he's been having those medical conditions before, maybe there's fights where he's gone in and he's been like 60%, but, it wasn't bad enough to send him to hospital, but, just to make weight before, he may have been having real issues. So we could see a rejuvenated and maybe even a more powerful, Ortiz Jr. at 154. Maybe he was just trying to stay at 147 due to the fact that's kind of the money division, right? Because of, Floyd and all those guys been around there. So, yeah, we could see a real good performance. I think, like Al said, I think it's going to be a showcase card, and I think Virgil's probably going to steal that. I think he'll get a good knockout early on against Lawson. Like Al said as well, his 3 losses have all come by knockout, and I think it'll be a 4th.
Right. Yeah. So here's hoping that everything's okay medically, especially for Virgil Ortiz Jr. And he returns back to the ring in full form this Saturday. In the co-main event of this DAZN card in Las Vegas, O'Hara Davies, 25-2, goes up against Ismael Barroso, 24-4-2. This is for the WBA interim super lightweight title. Barroso, you might remember him. He fought Rolly Romero last year in a fight where that became it received a lot of criticism for how the referee stopped the fight. I remember, at least on boxing forums, on online boxing Twitter and all that, that stoppage was replayed over and over and over with people talking about like, oh, it shouldn't have been stopped, but Rolly got that win and all that. And then also on the card, Raul Curiel, 13-0, undefeated, goes up against Elias Diaz, 12-1, and then also making his Golden Boy Promotions debut since being with Top Rank for numerous years. Arnold Barboza, 28-0, also undefeated, goes up against. All right, Mike, you're taking this name.
Undongeni.
That's what it is. I remember you said it before, right? Yeah, that's true.
He fought this last year. Now, sorry, July. Ernesto Mercado.
That's right. Yeah,
and he's also fought Devin Haney back in 2019.
That's right. Yeah, we mentioned his name a couple times over the years. That's why I remember the last name. But I'm giving you all of that. Al, what do you think about Arnold Barboza? He had so many fights under Top Rank, but he never crossed that threshold into any type of world title or a world title matchup. He was like on the cusp, but obviously he made a decision to leave, or his contract was up, and go with, I guess, the crosstown rival in Golden Boy. How do you think this pans out for him under the Golden Boy banner?
Well, again, he's got a quote unquote showcase opponent to look good against. But yeah, I don't really begrudge some of these matches, because with Arnold, it's his first fight on Golden Boy. Virgil's coming back. But yeah, I mean, he's been around, Arnold, but he's not, he's had some quality wins, but like you say, he's never really broken through, particularly last year. I think Jose Pedraza, that was probably the biggest win, but he's got quite a few names on his record. And, Golden Boy needs to add to its roster, because outside of Ryan Garcia, Virgil, Munguia, and Zurdo, they just need to be aware. Well, I'm sure they are aware that Ryan Garcia is probably not going to be around. Like, as soon as his contract's done, he's surely out of Golden Boy. We keep seeing these disagreements becoming public, so Golden Boy does need to build up who are going to be their next names. Maybe they can have a longer relationship with Munguia and Zurdo and Alexis, I guess, as well. But yeah, then they need to be looking at either picking up the free agents, or building up younger talent from the amateur games and bringing them through. But yeah, I think it was a promising sign from Golden Boy that they are looking at adding in athletes of this stature. I think it's a good signing.
And also in the news and notes section of this week's episode of the last round, longtime boxing manager Cameron Duncan passed away this week in Las Vegas following a difficult battle with cancer. He was 67 years old. His family actually confirmed his passing on social media. Cameron Duncan, for maybe fans who listen who might not be aware, he was obviously a guy behind the scenes. But he managed many of probably your favorite fighters that you've heard of over the years, many of the world's top boxers in his 30-plus years in the sport. Among some of his clients were Terrence Crawford, who we just touched on as a generational talent. That's a big signing right there. Timothy Bradley, Kelly Pavlik, Nonito Donaire, Diego Corrales, Mikey Garcia, Jesse Vargas. That's just to name a few. So the guy obviously had a pretty decent eye for talent. In the world of boxing.
Saved the best for last there, didn't you, Danny?
Jesse Vargas. Yeah. But Al, what do you think? You have some words for the passing of Cameron Duncan. He obviously, like we mentioned, just some of those names. He had quite an eye for boxing, and he was one of those guys behind the scenes that you never really heard of publicly, but he made a lot of stuff happen.
Yeah, I wrote a brief obituary for him on ProBox earlier, and I was looking through I'm sure Kevin Ioli wrote something about him and was kind of referencing some older articles. and there was quotes from, or like, older ones from how Cameron Duncan said he looks for talent, and the very first thing he always looks for is power. Because it's, if you haven't got power, it's like you're spending too much time trying to build up everything else. But it's like the old saying, a big punch can take you all the way around the world. And it seems like that was always the common theme in a lot of his, a lot of the guys that he did sign, including the one that he worked through right to the end, Jaron Ennis.
That's correct. Yeah. He's still that's probably going to be his lasting legacy right here, because Ennis still has a lot left in the tank, and he's still building his future. So yeah, Ennis is definitely going to be his lasting legacy in this generation of boxing. And then also just, I guess, the new year in Japan. 8 division champion Manny Pacquiao, we touched on earlier when we were talking about the monster Inoue, was present at the MMA event Rising 45, which took place in Saitama Super Arena in Japan. I mean, I don't know if it was planned or not. It seemed like he looked at the person behind him. He wasn't sure if he should say it. And then he got the okay. So kind of seemed very like spur of the moment. But Pacquiao pretty much confirmed, not pretty much, he said that he's planning to fight against Floyd Mayweather sometime in this new year, maybe by May or April, maybe this first quarter of this first year, or maybe just after. In Japan. So the second edition of Mayweather Pacquiao happens 8-9 years later, after their first meetup in 2015 on the other side of the world in the country of Japan. Should we be surprised, Al? What do you think here?
Well, it's kind of like Pacquiao's already got an exhibition lined up against a Muay Thai guy called Buakaw, and he's like, if you see, just Google this guy's name, or not Google it, put it into YouTube. His highlights are fucking ridiculous. This guy's a zombie. He just walks forward and gets hit like, however many times by all these kind of fists in a blur, and he doesn't even, he kind of just punches himself, shakes it off, and he fights like a cartoon. But he's only about, I'm sure he's still in his early 20s, and he's had hundreds of like Muay Thai fights. And I just think that is genius matchmaking. If you're going to have an exhibition between, a Manny Pacquiao who's thrown so many, like, I'm sure he's broken 1,000 punches in a fight multiple times in his career. I think he, against Joshua Clottey, even tried to punch Clottey. Oh, he did. And he got both sides of his face, at the same time with his left hand and his right hand. I think he even said to Freddie Roach beforehand, I'm going to try and punch, him at the same time with both fists. Then when he did, Freddie Roach was like, you son of a gun. So like you've got the guy that throws all the punches against the guy that can take all the punches. One guy who's, Pacquiao must be in his mid-40s against another guy who's in his mid-20s. So I love that. I love that match. And I feel like if that shines more light on this Muay Thai guy, then yeah, credit to them. So I think that's taken place sometime in April in Thailand. But why wouldn't Pacquiao also, box an exhibition against Floyd Mayweather? It makes a lot of sense. If you're Floyd Mayweather, surely, you'd want to do that. I've heard that I even heard Mayweather was supposed to do an exhibition with John Gotti. So he'd already done one. He was supposed to do the second one, I think, on December 9th. So whenever, we see these rumors, or we see the Nevada commission calendar and these there's commission holds on dates, I'm sure one of those dates was held for Mayweather and John Gotti. And it looks like that's going to be happening in the coming months. So maybe we do see, maybe we see Mayweather do this second one with John Gotti after there was some sort of mini riot after the conclusion of the first one. I'm sure they're going to use that to kind of build up the interest in the second. And I think it's even taken place in Vegas. So I'll certainly be all over that. And I'd love to be all over the Thailand one as well. With Pacquiao. That sounds great to me. 5 days in Bangkok, get to meet Manny Pacquiao, get to meet this Muay Thai guy. I'm sure his name's Buakaw. I'm probably if I'm butchering that, I'm putting my hands up. But yeah, if we bring those two guys together later in the year, then my only request would be, don't do it as an exhibition. Put that 50-0 record on the line.
Oh man, you know what? That would add a lot more intrigue to the matchup. you're right. That would add a lot more intrigue to the matchup because, they're still going to make a lot of money, especially in Japan, which, they love their sports, especially their boxing and stuff. And, when are they going to get a chance to see two of the best fighters in the last 15 years or so?
Yeah.
Especially together. So yeah, they're definitely it's going to be a big event feel, but it's definitely going to, if you put those records on the line in an actual professional fight, that is definitely going to get a lot more attention from the hardcore base. I could see that.
The only other time I think, like, if Conor McGregor's always chirping for another fight with Floyd, but that would be the only time I think, he's already kind of finished you on your feet in 10 rounds. But yeah, if they were going to do it again, yeah, put the 50-0 record on the line. I'm not sure there's many other, like, I don't turn my nose up at some of these exhibitions, but they've kind of got to make somewhat sense, and unless they make, so little sense that it does, seem like a good idea.
Right.
Sometimes bad films can be, good bad, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of the Misfit stuff I'm not really that interested in. I think Jake Paul is a unicorn in the sense that he's kind of crossed over reasonably well enough in that, and now he's fighting quote unquote legit. I don't know.
He's trying. He's trying.
Yeah, got to give him his, maybe not his flowers, but maybe just a little bit of credit. But he started, I'm not sure if this was his starting one, but when Mike Tyson and Roy Jones had that kind of show in their 50s, and Tyson then smoked weed backstage, Jake Paul was on the undercard. Yeah, that was a good exhibition. That was a good exhibition show. I'm not sure how many are really out there, but Pacquiao and Buakaw, Floyd. I'm not sure Floyd and John Gotti's that good of an exhibition, but it's got my interest, the fact that it's here, and I've never covered a Floyd fight. I've only really been around him once. I'd love to be around him again for, to kind of get that fight week experience. I never really got a chance to, moving to Vegas in 2022, 5 years after Floyd had already boxed Conor McGregor. But yeah, Pacquiao Mayweather would be hilarious.
Yeah, it's coming again. That's what Pacquiao said, so we will see. But Al, thank you for being the first guest on our weekly episode of 2024. We're entering our sixth year, Mike, with this podcast. Then we started in 2018, just after Canelo Triple G 2, right, Mike?
I think it was Canelo Triple G 1, no?
Was it 1? Oh, I feel like they fought like 4 times. I thought it was 2. You're right. I think it was 1. So yeah, this is our 6th year that we're entering here on the Last Round podcast. But Al, thank you for being the first guest of 2024 here on the Last Round.
It's my pleasure.
You've been on here multiple times, and you're always welcome back anytime. But go ahead and plug. The floor is yours. Is there anything you got? Go ahead and let the listeners know.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, keep tuning into the Last Round. I love it on this show. It's my out of all the places I've been a guest on, this is always the one I always want to come back on again and again. I'm mainly working at Pro Box TV, and they're taking really good care of me. I think it's a great company. So I really feel like it's the fastest rising company in all combat sports compared to, the amount of writers we've got on staff. Tris Dixon, myself, Dec Warrington, Kieran Mulvaney, Lukey Cattell. There's quite a few guys there doing a lot of content on the written side, but then there's a TV department. We're doing loads of TV shows. There's the Pro Box promotion side as well. So every other Wednesday, so two Wednesdays in the month, you get Wednesday night fights, and that's filling the void from the old ESPN Thursday night fights, the Showbox fights. There's not that many promoters specializing in those kind of events, and Pro Box does a really good job, I think, doing that with the matchmaking with Ryan and Chris Glover. Gary Jonas is the promoter, but yeah, I went down there actually at the end of last year, so a couple of weeks ago, to Florida, and they've got so much space. They've got an event center that probably can fit about 12 to 1,500 people, and it felt like a sellout when I was there for their last show of the year. The one guy that really took my breath away was Najee Lopez. He looked like a fucking animal. So if you're looking for someone a little bit under the radar to kind of tune into for 2024, I think Najee Lopez can do big things. I wouldn't be surprised if Angelo Leo got a world title shot and won a world title in a pro box ring in 2024. But yeah, so it feels like pro box is doing a lot of good things. I'm glad to be a part of the team.
Absolutely. And then one more thing you just reminded me of, Al, before we finish up here. Just any quick update or your take, because you haven't been on since this news was announced. But PBC and Amazon have obviously struck a partnership after their longtime relationship with Showtime, which obviously ceased operations at the end of December. But now PBC and Amazon, that seems like the partnership going forward. Have you heard anything from your reporting or your sources? Any tentative dates, or what are we looking at here?
When the Prime deal was announced, it kind of I was speaking to a few people. I was expecting it to come through that day, and I think I even tweeted the day before that the news was coming. The thing that took me by surprise was, one, that the first PBC on Prime event won't be until March. And two, it would be for 12 to 14 dates. I think PBC needs more dates than that. They've got such a big roster, and like we were saying earlier in the show, inactivity can be a killer for young athletes. You need to be boxing multiple times a year. Twice a year ideally as a champion, 3 times as a contender, and between 4 and 6 as a prospect coming up. So considering however many fighters they've got on the roster, I'm sure they've got at least 80, if not more. I feel like they're probably in the low hundreds. 12 to 14 dates only seems like they're going to get one fight a year. There was things you can take from that announcement, though. There was that was mainly going to cover pay-per-view events, but also PBC on what they were branding PBC Championship Boxing, which is pretty much the same as what Showtime Championship Boxing was. So the non-pay-per-view, free to air, as long as you've got the app or you're a subscriber, not behind a pay-per-view paywall. I'm not sure what the ratio will be. I imagine it's probably 6 pay-per-views a year, because if Gervonta Davis is fighting twice, both of those are pay-per-views straight away. It seems like I'm not sure whether Wilder will be around American boxing if he does fight again. It might just be for these, monster sort of paydays. If he's going to hold out for the Joshua fight, maybe that happens in a few years' time. I'm not sure he'll be on pay-per-view in America this year. Who else have they got? That's Terence Crawford. If he fights twice, that's another 2 pay-per-views. Spence has proven he's a boxer. He's got a loyal fan base. David Benavidez. They've got Canelo as well. So they're sport for choice on the pay-per-view side. One thing I have heard is that there might be a streaming deal, whether that's with, outside of the Prime deal. And it sounds like there could be a third, more, traditional cable sort of tie-in as well. So PBC is definitely not done. It seems like there's probably going to be, at least one more option that would provide more dates. For me, I'm unclear on how many events that would bring in a year, but that could easily get them to 20. They definitely need that, though, right. Just to get there. Guys like, Vito Mielnicki, is he going to be fighting on a pay-per-view? Maybe he fights on the undercard of one of the PBC Championship Boxing. But there's so many fighters like Vito that are going to probably need to go on the, the streaming option that they have with another streaming partner.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Mike, as we go down the finish line of Europe for this week's episode of 2024, first episode of 2024. Go ahead and let them know where they can find us and follow us.
We're at The Last Round 12 on Instagram and Twitter, or X as it's now called. Be sure to join us next week. We'll be previewing Jason Maloney, Saul Sanchez, and Artur Beterbiev against Callum Smith.
That's a interesting matchup that I'm definitely looking forward to. So for our first episode of 2024, thank you for staying with us. For our first guest of 2024, in Al Dawson of ProBox TV. For my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is the Last Round Podcast.